Good evening and welcome to the March 6, 2013 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. The first item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes of the February 20th, 2013 meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, I'll declare them approved as submitted. The one item on the consent agenda has been withdrawn from our agenda tonight, so we will have no consent on that. We do have 8 public hearings scheduled for this evening, so we'll move right into that phase. The first of which is an annexation request for approximately 1.02 acres located along South Church Street at Joe B. Jackson Parkway. Mr. P.J. Patel is the applicant. Mr. Adelot, good evening.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb, members of the Planning Commission. The first public hearing is to consider an annexation of the property, as you identified, to be on the west side of South Church Street, on the south side of Linford Drive. This property is the lots 45 and 46 of the Linford Oaks subdivision. The owners have requested this property be annexed into the city so that the property can benefit from city-provided services. Included with your agenda materials is an annexation feasibility study and a plan of services. The city is able to provide pretty much all of our services except for sanitary sewer service, which is remote from the property. And without some fairly extensive extensions, the city would not be in a position to provide sanitary sewer service to the property. And it would really be up to the developers or the owners to extend the sewer if they wanted it immediately or at some future date, at some unknown date, because the city currently has no plans to extend it. The city would extend it, but we have no plans to do so at this time. The other concern from the city staff is that the street, Linford Drive, is a substandard street. When I say substandard, that means that it does not conform to our current subdivision regulations. It does not have curbs and gutters. It does not have a commercial cross-section in it. And when I say a cross-section, I'm talking about the subgrade, the amount of base stone, the amount of asphalt that the city regulations would require for a commercial street. There's a companion request for this, and that will be the next item on the agenda, and that is to consider zoning this property to commercial highway along with the annexation. The first public hearing is to consider the annexation, and when our members of the public come to speak on this matter, we would prefer that you speak on the matter of annexation first, because there will be a second public hearing to talk about the zoning. However, I do understand, and I think the Planning Commission will understand, that sometimes these issues get intermingled. And I'm going to suggest to the Planning Commission that instead of voting on the first one, that you have both public hearings, one after the other, and then before you vote. Because I suspect that if the city is unwilling to annex the property, well, if the city is unwilling to annex it, the matter of zoning is moot. And if we're unwilling to zone it, then the owners may not desire to be annexed. In the event the property were annexed, the matter would be recommended to the City Council, and the City Council will have yet another public hearing. So this is the first step in a two-step process. I'll be glad to answer questions that the Planning Commission may have about the plan of services or the feasibility study or about the matter of annexation. And Ms. Ely, while we're having the public hearing, you may want to be able to bounce back to that map periodically.
Okay.
Any questions for Mr. Adelot or members of the staff? Okay. Does the representative of the applicant have a statement they'd like to make before we open the public hearing? Okay. Well, in that case, before I open the public hearing, if you have not attended one of our public hearings before, let me briefly go over how we conduct them. We'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak. You'll have an opportunity to come forward to speak. If you do come forward, please state your name and give your address. Keep your comments or questions to no more than 3 minutes. If you do have questions, the staff will make notes of your questions, and we'll try to get the staff to answer those at the conclusion of the public hearing. Make all your comments to members of the Planning Commission, not members of the audience. Applause and other things from the audience like that are considered inappropriate. All that being said, we'll open the public hearing at this time and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak. This is for the annexation request. Anybody at all? Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission? If there are none, we're ready for a motion.
Would,
Let's do them together.
That's right, excuse me. I'm sorry, I got excited. Move on to the second public hearing then. We'll move right on into that. We usually vote on one at a time. Thank you, Mr. Adelot. Zoning application for approximately 1.02 acres along South Church Street at Joby Jackson Parkway to be zoned commercial highway simultaneous with annexation. Mr. P.J. Patel is the applicant. Mr. Adelot.
yes, sir. This is the companion with the matter we just considered for annexation. The request is to zone the property to commercial highway simultaneous with its annexation, so that when it comes into the city, the zoning will be established. In the absence of this request, the property would have been annexed with an interim classification of RS-15. With this request, we're considering whether or not to zone it to commercial highway. The commercial highway classification is a general commercial zoning district. It's very similar, actually it is the same commercial classification as the Kroger at Innsbrook, just to the north along South Church Street, and also the associated commercial in and around that area. So that gives you, the members of the public and the Planning Commission an idea of the type of commercial uses. Allows general retail. It allows a variety of these type of uses. The staff has had some concerns about this, to be very frank with you, and I want to iterate them. Part of it is that the Linford Oaks subdivision came into the being as a residential subdivision. It was conceived as a subdivision for residential purposes back in the late 70s and has developed in that manner. The idea of changing it comes with some realization that it's going to be a little bit out of character. It's my understanding that there were restrictions, that the restrictions have either been lifted or they have run, so the restrictions are no longer on the property. The other part is that the road, when it was built, was simply built as a residential street. It was not built as a commercial street. So with the redevelopment of this property, if it's its own commercial highway, the applicant can expect to be obligated to upgrade the road along his frontage. Not just one side, but probably both sides, because in order for the commercial street to operate, it will require both sides of the street to be to a commercial standard. Some of the misgivings of staff have been that there are the possibility that certain commercial highway uses may not be most appropriate right at the entrance to this type of subdivision. And so that's something that I want the Planning Commission to consider when it deliberates this. Now, the pro side of the application, I think that there has been a big change to the area with the reconstruction of South Church Street and the continued development of our county. This subdivision was conceived at a time when Rutherford County had a population of about 80,000, maybe 60,000. Now it has a population of almost 250,000, 250,000, and growing. The property diagonally across the street has been zoned for commercial purposes. That's on the north side of what was County Farm Road and then now Joby Jackson Parkway. On the south side, we've approved the Walmart across from this property. And the Walmart site plan is expected to get underway this summer to coincide with the completion of Joby Jackson that's going to be reconstructed in front of this. With the Walmart is the signalization of that intersection. So we're going to be seeing some real big changes there. So the applicants have viewed the property as having changed from the way it was originally zoned, and that maybe commercial is more appropriate. Certainly, I doubt we'll be seeing this property remain residential for long, the way things currently are. Also, there have been some efforts on the part of other property owners in the area to the north to get commercial zoning or at least some home occupations for light commercial uses with Rutherford County in that same subdivision along South Church Street, along the frontage. So circumstances are certainly different now than they were several years ago. And I want you to consider this also when you deliberate on this, because I think part of what we want to see when we look at a change of use and a change of zoning is, have conditions changed? Is the current zoning no longer most appropriate? And that the current zoning is for residential purposes under the county zoning. Will this benefit the community generally, not just the property owners, but the general area? So I think these are things that you need to consider in your deliberations. At this time, we need to conduct a public hearing, and we need those who are interested in this to come forward and to provide testimony to the Plan Commission about how you view this property should be, whether you think that the zoning change is appropriate, whether you don't, or if you have questions, please ask those questions because we would like to answer you if we can. So with that, I'm going to relinquish it to our chairman, and Chairman, it's time to move the public hearing forward.
Okay. The same rules will apply to this public hearing as all of them tonight. I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Chris Bratcher. I'm the commercial real estate broker at Red Realty at 522 Uptown Square here in Murfreesboro. I'm here tonight representing Miss Barnes and Mr. and Miss Thomas, who is the second house, the house right behind Miss Barnes, and also I'm here representing Mr. Patel, who is the individual who is purchasing this property. We're asking this property to be rezoned to commercial, and some of the reasons are that Miss Barnes, who lives there, has been there for over 20 years, and as Mr. Adelot pointed out, that neighborhood has changed quite a bit in the last 20 years. She's now on a busy 4-lane commercial highway. She listens to 18-wheelers and trucks and traffic all day long in front of at her property, and she also is fixing to have a traffic signal right at her front door, and her driveway is probably about 50 feet from this corner. As mentioned earlier, Joe B. Jackson is going to be a new interstate exit. It's going to lead and bring traffic right to her front door, and that's just the way the city is growing out there, and. Not to mention that the Walmart, the world's largest retailer, is going to be across the street from her. So she'll be looking at Walmart's parking lot lights. She'll be looking at the traffic 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that the Walmart will generate. Miss Barnes, along with others along South Church, feels like that maybe their quality of life as a residential use is no longer exists like it once did. And like I said, Miss Barnes is retired, and she wants to be able to sell her property and move to some place that's a little bit more desirable for her to spend her retirement years and enjoy the peace and quiet and the tranquility that I think that she deserves. So we're asking for your support of this rezoning. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bratcher. Who would like to be next?
Fair public speaking.
We all do.
It's okay. Me too.
My name is Dina Ferguson. I live at 322 Linford Drive. Well, I understand Miss Barnes wanting that quality of life, that quiet, peaceful time. So do I. Now, I live a little bit further down Linford Drive. But the moment that Walmart comes in and that traffic light comes in, we're going to have more traffic. But we're going to have traffic that comes all the way into our residential home, turns around in our driveway, and goes right back out because, oh no, that's a dead-end road. I wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. They take those two homes and those two lots, tear down those homes, build some sort of retail center, whatever they decide to build there. We don't know what kind of clientele is going to show up. And it is a very peaceful residential neighborhood. We walk our dogs, we ride our bikes. We are totally against the zoning of commercial for that property. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Kristen Holmes, and I'm a real estate agent with A&E Real Estate, and I'm also the granddaughter of Sarah Raper. She lives at 3549 Shelbyville Highway, and I'm just here to say that we are in favor of this. Change is inevitable, and with Walmart comes growth in every direction, so we are in favor of this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes.
Hello, my name is Clifton Nix, and I live at 120 Linford Drive. I can see the property from my front porch. There's two pieces of property. One's facing 230 Highway 231. The other's facing Linford Drive. So if y'all do this as planning, I'm going to get to walk out of my front porch and see the back of a dumpster. You're just bringing too much into a residential neighborhood. I can understand Highway 231 being zoned as commercial. Things are changing. Growth, Murfreesboro is growing. But we don't need to put our residential streets, have zoning on the residential streets. So when that neighborhood was built 20 years ago, things have changed, but you still got families that live in those neighborhoods, and we don't want whatever comes, liquor stores, 7-Elevens, we don't want to walk out of our front yard and see semis unloading at that point in time. I mean, Highway 231 is commercial. That's great. It's growing, but keep it out of our neighborhoods and homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nix.
My name is Mark Dixon. This is my first time up here, so I'm very nervous too. I live at 114 Linford Drive, which is diagonal to the properties you guys are talking about. I'm just going to read what I have because, like I said, I'm nervous. I'm about 50 feet, maybe less, from end to end of what the property would be. My family moved to Murfreesboro in July of 2007, and we selected our home in this area because of the quiet and semi-secluded neighborhood, yet with easy access to the highway. At that time, we were unaware of all the development plans in the works of such things as Walmart and the other commercial expansions that would significantly affect our area. We kind of paid a premium for the house at that time before the housing market crashed. I believe the commercialization of the corner of our street, especially for the purpose of some of the things that have been discussed, would possibly have a further negative impact on the value of my home, property, and neighborhood. Our road right now receives very little traffic, basically it's only the residential traffic that's in that neighborhood. Because our road is easily unnoticed by most of the people passing by on 231. They have to know they're going there. They have no other reason to turn there. I believe adding a business on the corner of our road would adversely change all of that, and that we would get extra unwanted traffic that would make our street less safe for walking and biking that a lot of the residents do. I'm also concerned that more attention will be drawn to our street and neighborhood homes, making us more susceptible to criminal intent. Linford Drive right now is a dead-end road that backs up to Barfield Park with walking access to the park, which is another advantage to our neighborhood. There's only one other outlet for driving traffic, which is Highfield Drive, which is one street north of Linford Drive. If the strip of 231 in the general residential vicinity between Linford Drive and Highfield Drive, which is all currently housing, is developed as commercial property, our neighborhood's going to be trapped behind this development. Unless there are some long-range plans for commercial development further down Linford Drive, such as making it an extension for Joe B. Jackson Parkway and through part of the park, it seems to me that commercial development on our street would have a negative effect on the people living on Linford Drive and the residential neighborhood in the immediate vicinity. Even though it's probably inevitable that our residential property will at some time become commercialized in the near future, I don't understand why nearby surrounding fields and properties currently undeveloped can't be first considered for this kind of purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Teresa Watson, and my family actually owns the 6 acres of property that immediately surrounds this. We touch the tracks on Linford. at 111 Linford Drive, and we also have 35118 Shelbyville Highway and 3536 Shelbyville Highway. Pretty much owned the property since 1974, so we really have seen change over the last 30-something years. The residential integrity of all of this property started changing when they did the four-lane divided highway out there. We lived there when it was a two-lane road. Shortly after that, with the development of the road, then Middle Tennessee Electric came through, and we lost all of our nice big trees that were out there. And then 5-6 years ago, when Walmart got approval for the construction of the Walmart store, the economy kind of turned down. And so we've actually been sitting in limbo for all this time. We've had one tract of land out there that's been for sale for 5 years, and we have not had one offer. People are afraid because they know that commercial's going across the street. They don't want to buy it as residential because they don't know if it can get zoned commercial. And, it's just that limbo back and forth. And we've been neighbors and friends with Ms. Barnes for a lot of years. I, too, don't want to see her or my sister, who lives right next door on my mother's property, Bright Lights, big city, right at Walmart. And I think it's just time. The zoning across the street that changed to commercial, certainly the property that's right in front of it, I think it's just time, to move forward and get the people that have been sitting there get a contract. Then people don't want the contract because you can't get the zoning. And I think it's just, it's our opinion that the zoning should be approved, and I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Watson.
Good evening. I'm Mary Jo Holder, and Teresa Watson is my sister. And as she said, we have lived in that area for a long time, since 1974. My property adjoins the two lots that are looking at being rezoned. We all know that change is going to happen. We already know Walmart's going to be across the street from us. It is residential right now, but it's not going to be once Walmart gets there. I love where I live. I have lived there a long time, and I hate to see it change, but it's going to change. And I don't want to live right across the street from a huge Walmart. I am totally for the rezoning because we're going to have to. It's not going to stay the same. And I would support it, and I hope that you all will support it too, as that whole area is going to be needed to be commercial for the Walmart development and for the development that's going to follow that, as it does in every other area where a Walmart comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holder. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Stacy Thomas, and I do live at the property at 107 Linford Drive that is in question of being rezoning. We have lived there 8 years, and when we moved there, it was quiet, and then 3 years later, Walmart was pretty much approved to become into, right across the street from us. And I understand that, being further back in the neighborhood, you're not going to have the lights shining right in your face. You're not going to have the traffic. And being right there on the corner, we do have people pull in our driveway, pull right back out because they went, it is a dead-end street. So, we have the traffic now turning in and out of our driveways. And we've tried to sell our property as residential for the last 3 years and have nothing touched on it residential at this time. Commercial, yes, but I do approve of it being rezoned, and I hope that you do also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
Hi, I'm Liz Barnes. I live on the corner in question.
When I moved there over 20 years ago, it was peaceful and quiet. I had a huge, beautiful yard. The highway was 2 lanes, and I thought, this is where I'm going to retire. Well, fast forward many years, half of my front yard is gone. Most of my trees and flowers are gone because of the widening of the highway. Traffic has increased. I can't sleep at night because of all the traffic, the sirens, the 18-wheelers, the people on their motorcycles. You cannot sleep all night long. Yesterday, there were 3 different sirens within 20 minutes of my period. It's going to get worse. Joe B. Jackson is going in. There'll be more traffic. It's going to be louder. And then we've got good old Kmart, my favorite place to shop, but I don't want them for neighbors. I don't want the increase in traffic. I don't want the increase in noise, and I don't want to have their parking lot lights shining in my living room window 24/7. I can't sell my house as a residential facility. Nobody will buy it. It's not worth the plug nickel. I beg you, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, rezone my property. Let me sell it as commercial so I can retire. Well, I'm already retired. So that I can move back to Georgia to be closer to my daughter and live out the rest of my life in peace and quiet, minding my own business, doing the things I enjoy. And I can't do that where I am now. Please, please, please rezone my property.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes.
Hi, my name is Jane Aker, and I also live at 120 Linford. I feel the plight for Ms. Barnes and the other neighbors that are facing the commercial of the big giant Walmart that's going to come in across the street. And I understand. And their argument and their plight is they don't want the traffic in their front yard. They don't want the lights in their front yard. But the first thing they want to do is to beg you and to plead with you to zone our side of Church Street to be commercial, so then those lights will be in my front yard. That traffic will be in my subdivision. We have children. My husband and I run in the neighborhood. It's a great place for us to run and be safe and not have to worry about traffic. There are many other people in the community that do exercise and use it as a thoroughfare to the park that butts up against our subdivision. That if you bring in the commercial even down into the subdivision, that one lot actually puts it in our subdivision, not just out on 231, that you're going to further drag down then the values of not just the plights of the people that are out on 231 that want you to change it, then those houses that are around that area that are in Linford Oaks. So I am asking you to decline.
Thank you, Ms. Aker. Anybody else?
Can I speak one more time?
Sorry.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Bill Huddleston, President of Huddleston Steel Engineering here in Murfreesboro, and I'm here on behalf of the Patels who are looking to purchase this property. We've already heard from the residents and Mr. Bratcher. This is not a residential property. It's directly across from Walmart. It's on a 4-lane roadway right at a signalized intersection, but it's going to be signalized. Nobody wants to live there. But there are some valid concerns that have been brought up, and I'd like to address those, especially Mr. Nix and Ms. Aker, who just spoke a minute ago. You have regulations now that are in place that help protect neighbors and help ensure that we're going to have good quality development. The Patels have a good track record here in town of producing quality developments, and they know the process and they understand what will be required of them. We have met with Mr. Adelot. We understand that we're going to have to improve the roadway in front of this project. There are also other requirements that will address the concerns of the neighbors, including what Mr. Nix said and Ms. Aker said. For example, dumpster screening is required. We have to have a significant screen around a dumpster. Also, a buffer will be required up against their property so that this thick landscaping buffer will be provided it'll be the western edge of this property. The development itself will primarily take place on the corner lot. There's been some discussion about that second lot, but that second lot we're having to purchase primarily because that's where the septic tank system's going to go. And as you know, we can't do anything else with that property as long as it's reserved for the septic tank system. So not only will that thick buffer be there, but there will also be space between our commercial development and the residences. In addition to that, there's been a lot of talk about lights. You now have a new requirement that a photometric plan is required of all commercial developments of this type. So we cannot spill over light into the residential neighborhood. Mr. Adelot can correct me, but I believe it's half a foot candle of light cannot be exceeded over the property line, and that's not very much light. So we will have to prove to you when we come through site plan approval, which will be required should this zoning get approved. We will come back to you and we'll have to prove that we're not producing any more light than that across the property line. And the last thing I want to talk about is the traffic. There's been some concern about traffic going into the neighborhood past this development. I do not see that happening. Linford Drive stubs into the city park, so I do not expect that to ever be extended. Also, we will be looking for access not only on Linford Drive, which we will have to improve in front of our development, but also at 231, so that anybody who comes to our lot and has to get or decides they don't want to be there and wants to get back out to 231, they can drive through our property to get back to 231, and there will be room for them to turn around on our property in order to get back to the signal at 231. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Let me conclude the public hearing, Mr. Huddleston, then we may have to call you back up for questions, okay?
Thank you.
Anybody that's not spoken that'd like to speak?
Hello, council members. My name is Tanya Allen. I live at 3416 Shelbyville Highway. I have, I guess, a unique perspective. I live there, but I also have a home-run-based business of massage therapy and chiropractic with a conditional use permit. Over the last 10 years, I have done my best to blend in with the subdivision. I have no problems at all with the annexation or the commercial. However, due to the residential, I do have concern about what the use of the property is going to be. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's supposed to be a liquor store. We already have 4 alcohol specialty stores between that location and I-24 already. I mean, with me, my idea would be if it could be used as an office complex. Therefore, there's no light issues at night. I mean, there's definitely ways to compromise and have a good special use for the business, but it is going to be commercial at some point. With a Walmart there, you know, it's going to be that way. As a business owner, I can see that, and as a residential owner, because we do live there as well, is I can understand the neighborhood's concerns about that. And I just ask that the council keep that in mind, is what the use is going to be and how is it going to blend in, and if it will blend in. And I think that's the best compromise with it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Crystal Price. I live at 322 Linford Drive, which is almost to the very back of the dead end. I almost butt up to the park. I oppose the rezoning and the annexation, not because I'm against Walmart or commercialization or change. In fact, I'm looking forward to being able to ride my bike over to Walmart to get stuff, But this road, it's possible to have a Walmart and not commercialize everything around it. I work in Bedford County as a teacher, and there's a Walmart there that's been there for several years, and the main entrance to it across the street is a neighborhood. There's no offices over there commercial-wise. It's a neighborhood. So it's possible to have a Walmart and not have everything commercialized. I'm also against it. Several people have said that we walk through that neighborhood. The kids are on it all the time. Animals are on it. It's a residential neighborhood. And if I lived on 231 and knew that Walmart was going to be across the street from me and I would have a hard time selling my house, then yeah, I would want it to be zoned to commercialization so I could get out of there. The rest of us that are behind there that can't be zoned commercialization, we're going to be stuck there. And, I'm way back there, but I still hear the trucks. I hear the sirens. I hear everything. I can even hear the interstate, actually. But it's just going to make it worse. And we always have people that come down that street, even past the dead end sign close to where I live at, they still go down and they realize, oh, it's a dead end, so they pull into our driveway, back up and leave. This is going to increase because you're going to have Walmart over there across the street. So I don't know if I made myself clear, but I am definitely against the zoning for this to make it commercial.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, empty space at Kroger's.
Anybody at all? Last call. Okay, so close the public hearing. Mr. Adlott, do you have any comments?
No, sir. I heard statements, but I heard no questions.
Okay. Mr. Huddleston had some statements that he made. Was there any questions of Mr. Huddleston? Ms. Jones? Okay.
Talking about the buffering, if this property was rezoned, in the second lot, they're saying would be used for just field lines or septic, but the buffering would still have to go at the back of that property as well, right? Because that's really the where it's adjacent to residential. And how do you buffer the north side? That's the street.
The city's buffering requirements would be along the property line, and we would require that the back, even though it would be the area with the field area, that would be the property line would require a dense landscaping buffer. In fact, in that area would be a type D buffer, is my recollection, which is a fairly heavy buffer by our standards of what constitutes buffers. And it'd be something that we would demand that they warrant and maintain. The challenge is always the street, and that's probably going to be something that, with the passage of time, we'll probably see someone coming on the north side, because just as surely as we consider approving the south side, the north side will be in with a very similar set of circumstances, except the difference will be that we've already approved the south side. So whether or not the day comes that we need to see a buffer over there, I don't know. But one of the things we can do is during site plan review is look at how we orient the buildings, how we orient the parking, what we can do to maybe mitigate headlights, to look a little closer at the circumstances on the ground. Right now, we're looking at a map. The map does not show the whole story about what needs to be done to protect it. It does not interject design. Now, we've heard that Mr. Huddleston is working on a site plan. Yes, I've had some conversations about a possible plan. but I have not seen a site plan that demonstrates compliance with all of our requirements. They showed me a footprint of a building on a lot, and showed an area that would be set aside for a buffer. But that's as far as they've gotten with me, because first they had to go through an annexation and a zoning process. So they've not invested in the full site plan process. Ordinarily, if it's not a plan development, they don't. That's something that I would expect, if it's more than a 5,000 square foot building, or if it's more than 1 acre, it will be back for you for site plan review. And this site would qualify for that by one or the other of the tests.
And can you also explain to me, is Linford Drive and the properties off of Highfield Drive, were those all developed as one subdivision, or is Highfield Drive a separate subdivision than Linford Drive?
It's a separate subdivision. That was, I think, Palmer South, maybe, that was the name of it.
Palmer South.
And is it's newer, the Highfield Drive area is newer than the Linford Drive?
I think it's the other way around.
Other way around. But the properties that are on 231, for example, Ms. Barnes' property, was it developed as a part of this Linford Drive subdivision, or was it already a house sitting on 231?
It's my understanding that this is part of the Linford subdivision, and the house on it was built as part of that subdivision. Looking at the lot numbers, I think this lot's 45 and 46. If it were a separate existing house, it probably would have numbered it differently, maybe as something different.
And one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that there are some other properties along 231, like I believe Ms. Allen mentioned, that are being used in some commercial nature, some business type nature. Are most of those in this Linford Drive and Highfield Drive area?
Yes, between Linford Drive and the city limits to the north across from Savannah Ridge, there are some houses that have been approved, at least one of them, and that's the one that spoke, by Rutherford County as a home occupation. A couple have been before the county's planning commission for some sort of commercial considerations. Some of them have not been approved. Some of them have been approved but maybe never done. Some of them may be approved as administrative home occupations. That's not uncommon for home occupations to be approved. In fact, inside the city, we occasionally do, actually frequently do, administrative home occupations if you meet certain requirements. One of them is you have no employees. You operate in so many square foot or fewer. So it's not unlikely that there's been these type of business licenses issued in these kind of places.
Okay, and sorry, I thought of one more thing. Mr. Aylett, I think we do have, and you can probably remember and cite them easier than me, some areas of town where we already have, like, I'm thinking like Innsbrook, other areas of town where there are commercial uses on the main highway that back directly up to residential uses. Do we have several areas like that?
Well, yes, one of them that comes to mind is the Indian Hills, which is right across from Innsbrook, and we have the Camino Real is one, but I'm thinking of actually the Goodwill, which is we've recently approved a site plan for Goodwill, which backs up to the Indian Hills subdivision. Also, right there at the corner, we have a fire station, which is sort of a it's an institutional use. It's the front door into Indian Hills. But further to the north, we've got, across from Calumet, we've got Caroline Drive, which has residential uses. In that case, there's a lot of duplexes in that subdivision, back right up to commercial uses, and a storage development, a hot rod store, what used to be a hot rod store. To the north on Memorial Boulevard, we have some of those. Love Court and Haynes Haven Lane, both of those are right there, just surrounded by commercial and across the street from commercial.
Okay.
It's not uncommon and it's not completely unheard of to see commercial adjacent to residential. One of the things we recognize, though, is that when we see those, we feel that there is a need to be more demanding and to give a higher degree of scrutiny when we see that type of commercial development adjacent to residential. That's part of why we have a plan commission site plan review, is to give you guys the ability to weigh in on.
And in those areas that you're discussing, are the buffer requirements in place, or in those cases was commercial there first and then residential came in?
It's been a little bit of both, and some of it predates our current buffering requirements. Goodwill is a good example because it's coming in, the Goodwill is now under construction, and that buffer must be constructed by Goodwill and that developer as part of their development plan.
Before they can occupy.
That's right.
Their certificate of occupancy.
That's part of their plan, and we spend a lot of time agonizing over that buffer.
Okay.
You've got a lot of the area on Memorial where Jones Car Wash is, for example. It backs up to residential quite a bit through there.
The Planning Commission has given some other examples. Georgetown, Kroger's, right, in the little Georgetown Center beside the Kroger's on Northfield, backs right up to Georgetown subdivision. And they've had a good buffer plan there that predate our buffer requirements.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any other questions?
I have one. Mr. Adelot, I don't know if it would be at site plan approval or not, but, and I don't know if this is feasible, but we've heard several comments about the fact that the residents on Linford are worried about cars coming back through there and then turning around, and the thought comes to my mind that the sooner that someone would realize that is a dead-end street, maybe that would lean towards there would be fewer people coming down that street that mistakenly think that they can get through it. Is it possible to literally have signage that says dead-end street that's hanging from a signal light that would be facing 231 and facing Walmart, or literally be that bold to do so?
I don't know. That's something I've never observed. I would want to discuss this with Mr. Brian Chandran. He is very knowledgeable about the manual uniform traffic control devices and what's permitted. Certainly he has the resources to investigate it, and I will discuss that with him. I'm curious, regards to this application that you mentioned, if that kind of thing can be done.
I was thinking the same thing somewhat. I think maybe on the property itself, but where a car could observe the sign if it was approved and be able to turn around before they pass the point where they could turn onto this property so they wouldn't have to proceed on into the subdivision.
I'll add this, that the part that is in the city, we'll have the authority to place signage on that. Anything beyond that, we would coordinate with the Rutherford County Road Board, and they're usually very willing to work with the city on these areas that are immediately adjacent to the city.
Any other questions?
I think the applicant should look into the sign question that we just discussed and see if he could come up with a solution to that in the site plan if this is approved.
Mr. Young? Anybody else? What are the wishes of this commission?
Mr. Lamb, I'll remind you, first we need to consider the matter of the
Annexation
and
first.
the matter of zoning.
Chairman, I move for approval of annexation.
The motion to approve annexation has been made and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Now we're ready for a motion pertaining to the zoning.
I'll make a motion that we approve the zoning of commercial, knowing that we can look at this site plan at site plan approval and scrutinize it in the way that we think would be the best interest for the whole neighborhood. So I'll make a motion we approve the zoning.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to item C, zoning application for approximately 0.9 acres along Iron Gate Boulevard to be rezoned from RS 15 to commercial highway. James B. Haynes family is the real estate is the applicant. Mr. Adelot.
Yes, sir. The subject property is located to the west of Memorial Boulevard, and it's located just to the north of Iron Gate Boulevard. This property lies behind the Kroger's that fronts the Memorial Boulevard. On the map that is now on the television screen, it would be the area that's colored blue. It's a part of a parcel that is already about 3.09 acres. The 0.9 acres is the area that's colored blue. The remainder of the property is already zoned commercial highway. These zone lines date back to before the construction of Windlewood Drive and Iron Gate Boulevard, all the way back into the 80s. The applicants have requested this rezoning to help to get all of the parcel into one zoning classification. And I think there's a belief on their part that the property has no potential for single-family residential development. To some extent, they view this as a housekeeping, and I'm inclined to agree with them that it's a little bit of a housekeeping type of measure, because the zone line should follow the street rather than cut through the parcel, with the corner being residential and the remainder being commercial. So the Planning Commission needs to conduct a public hearing on this and get testimony from the public. There will be a second public hearing to consider other property that's along Memorial, but this is for the area that was shown on the map in blue. If the Planning Commission has any questions, I'll be glad to answer either before or after the public hearing.
Any questions? If not, I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak for this matter.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, members of Planning Commission and staff. I'm Brick Murphy of the law firm of Murphy & Murphy, and we represent the applicant, the James B. Haynes Family Real Estate Partnership. We've got two applications before you tonight. I'm going to comment on both of them, and then I will later in the second public hearing incorporate my statements from this public hearing into the next one, if that's all right with Chairman Lamb.
Why don't you just, since we're having two separate public hearings, we get confused very easily.
Okay, for the sake of clarity.
To this one right here, okay?
Thank you, Chairman Lamb.
I know your dad's taught you to drag it out as long as possible.
Okay. I won't comment on that. Before you is the 0.9 acres that's basically a remnant where Windlewood and Iron Gate were cut in. When the Haynes family came into the city, they had property zoned commercial highway, and then when the roads came in, this piece was left with a commercial. And so what we're asking is to have this piece rezoned as commercial highway. We think it's logical that it be zoned consistent with the adjacent parcels, which are already have been developed by the applicant. That's where the post office and the Kroger are, and this little piece will just round out that commercial block there. And we think it's a logical extension of that commercial, and basically this is what I've previously referred to as kind of an orphan tract, and it's been left orphaned, so to speak, and we think having a consistent zoning with that block would be desirable and logical. Mr. Sam Haynes is here on behalf of the applicant, and Mr. Bill Huddleston as well, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and we appreciate your consideration. Ask that you vote in favor.
Any questions of Mr. Murphy or the applicant? Thank you, sir. Any questions or comments pertaining to this? Well, we'll move on. Anybody that would like to speak either for or against this proposal? Nobody? In that case, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission? Now we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I agree that this is a housekeeping a matter that has to come before us for a public hearing, and this was created 25 years ago, and I think it's in good order to move for approval.
Second motion.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to the next public hearing is a zoning application for approximately 15.2 acres along Memorial Boulevard to be rezoned from RS-15 to Commercial Highway. James B. Haynes Family Real Estate applicant. Mr. Adelot?
Yes, sir. The subject of this request is the property that lies to the west of Memorial Boulevard, south of the U.S. Post Office site, and north of Adams Place development. This property is a portion of a much larger tract of about 100 acres, maybe 98 acres, that extends from Adams Place all the way to Haynes Drive. The property consists of 15.2 acres. The property has a depth off of Memorial Boulevard of only about 350 feet. It's the area that's colored blue. Just to give you some perspective, the Ravenwood subdivision to the west, that would be the subdivision that is on the west side of the tract that this is a portion of, is about 2,000 feet from Memorial Boulevard. So this is just the frontage. The owner has a feeling and a belief that the property should be zoned to a commercial highway. Circumstances have changed, particularly with the rezoning, not the rezoning, but the site plan approval of the Walmart, also with the continued development in the community. Their feeling is that the property has commercial appeal, and they would like to be able to sell the parcel of property to allow it to be out parcels of sorts associated with the Walmart that has been approved at the southern end of the property across Memorial Boulevard, across from Adams Place. The Planning Commission studied this last month, last month at its regular work session where we discussed this generally. Certainly, if you have any questions now, I'll be glad to answer your questions. You need to conduct a public hearing on this before making a recommendation to council.
Any questions for Mr. Adelot? Mr. Murphy, would you like to come back forward?
Thank you, Chairman Lamb, members of the Planning Commission and staff. Once again, I'm Rick Murphy of the law firm of Murphy & Murphy, and we represent the applicants, the James B. Haynes Family Real Estate Partnership. We are requesting that this 15.2 acres be rezoned as commercial highway. As Mr. Adelot mentioned, it's just 350 feet deep. What we are proposing is a tight D buffer between the Adams Place development towards town and these commercial and this 15.2 acres of commercial property. And what the applicant is anticipating is having approximately 7 commercial lots along Memorial Boulevard between the post office and Kroger development and Adams Place. They own, that is the Haynes Family Partnership, owns approximately 75 acres behind this property, between this property and the existing single-family residential in the back. One thing that I think is important to point out is 17 acres of that 75 is the 231 West Drainage Basin, which is something we couldn't develop in if we wanted to. And so I think that's one thing to point to, that 17 acres will not be developed. And that 17 acres is a drainage basin that serves the general area, including some of the other commercial development already on that corridor. We have contacted Mr. Hoyt Barrett and Mrs. Laverne Fitzpatrick. They live across Memorial Boulevard. Hoyt Barrett is one of the few single-family residences that's owner-occupied anywhere in that area. Mr. Hoyt Barrett and Ms. Laverne Fitzpatrick have both expressed their support for this application and have agreed to allow me to instruct the Planning Commission that they're in favor, but they could not be here tonight. Once again, Mr. Bill Huddleston is here on behalf of the applicant and Mr. Sam Haynes, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Any questions for Mr. Murphy or the applicants? Thank you, sir. I'll open the public hearing this time, ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak either for or against this proposal.
My name is Ronnie Page. I own the house on 2034 Memorial Boulevard. It's actually next door to the Walmart. There'll be a red light in my driveway for the access on one side of the Walmart. The property across the street is the Haynes property, and I understand that. And they want to develop the front, which I'm all completely for. To realize the value of my property and all the property between the Walmart store and the Sportscom, this strip needs to go commercial property. My home, or the house that I own on Memorial Boulevard, is a rent house. I'm not even able to rent it at the time because of the situation there. Anytime there is a commercial development in Rutherford County, I think the Planning Commission should look at how many jobs it brings in, how many people, opportunities it will give the young people of this county a place to work. Yeah, I'm against traffic. I'm against congestion. If you leave my house where I live and try to go across town at 3 o'clock, it's almost impossible because of the school zones. And I understand some people have problems with the Murfreesboro growing the way it is. We're in an economic area where we're in a boom, and we're going to have to realize that boom while we can, because in a few years that boom might stop. And anytime we can create jobs for Rutherford County, we need to do so. I guess I am really, because I do own a property there on Memorial Boulevard, wanting to go commercial because I can realize the complete value of my property if it does go commercial. It's been held up for a few years because of restrictions on the property about being a commercial property. We're in a process of getting those released now. As soon as that is done, then yes, my property will sell as commercial property. I appreciate your time that you let me stand here before you. And like I said, anytime we can increase jobs in Rutherford County, we need to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm Kathy Nobles, and I reside at 1447 Avellino Circle. And my husband and I own the property directly across from the Haynes property. We feel like this is a very logical request, and we are very much in favor of the rezoning.
Thank you, Ms. Nobles. Anybody else? Nobody? Okay, so I'll close the public hearing. Comments and questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Mr. Aylott, this may be a dumb question. How do we handle, all right, so we zone this blue area commercial, the area in the back still RS-15, not knowing exactly what's going to happen to that area, the buffer zone, what do we do? Does the applicant have to bond what they might do if this stays RS-15 behind it, or how does that work? Because I'm assuming that they're not going to put a buffer up in the rear of this area, since we don't know what will eventually happen behind it.
Until the zoning changes, the zoning requirements will be observed.
Okay.
And the buffer will be a part of a site plan requirement.
Okay.
Now, they are free to make application to the Board of Zoning Appeals if they can demonstrate some sort of hardship.
I see.
Or something, and that may or may not be granted. I don't know. But at this point, they would be expected to meet the buffering requirements for the property adjacent to RS-15. Even though they own both of it today, when they subdivide it, things will change.
Okay.
I will point out that they did provide a little bit of a concept plan that shows a little bit about streets that they're expecting to build. Part of what we're wanting to look at is effective traffic management. And we've asked them to map out potential traffic signal locations to protect those potential traffic signal locations so that they don't put something in the way of it to prevent us from having an effective traffic program. So they've begun to map out what will be required, and that'll probably be some sort of backage road to provide access to these parcels, so that they will, and shared access drives, so that we won't see just a series of driveways one after another that cause it to be the kind of undesirable strip development that's very impactful to traffic. They're going to try to combine these joint accesses and try to use the traffic signals where they can be, when they're warranted. And certainly get back to Lieutenant Patrick McBride Drive that's going to be part of the Walmart development, and will be signalized.
Anything else? Any other questions? No, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve this rezoning.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to item E, it's a PUD amendment application for approximately 44 acres along Rucker Lane. Adams and Parks Investments is the applicant. Mr. Adelot.
Yes, sir. The subject property is located along the west side of Rucker Lane. This is a portion of the Marymount Springs PRD that was actually PUD that was approved several years ago. The applicant desires to change some of the PUD requirements for a portion of the property, and that would be for the area that's colored blue. Basically, they desire to remove from the program the alley-loaded homes so that there will be no alleys constructed in this area. They also desire to removing all homes from around the mansion and leaving it on its own lot of record. Previously, the current program book had shown the mansion having lots around it and being incorporated as an amenity center, and that just does not seem to work. And also adding some additional recreation opportunities with swimming pool and amenity area that's constructed along the Marymount Boulevard. Instead of just a swimming pool, they're looking at some additional opportunities. These are spelled out in the program book that was delivered to you as part of the agenda materials, separate from the email, but also in the email digital copy of your agenda. I see we have an audience, Mr. Bob Parks. He is representing this application. If you have any questions of me, I'd be glad to answer them. You need to conduct a public hearing prior to making a recommendation for our city council.
Okay. Mr. Parks, do you have anything to say before we open the public hearing? Okay. In that case, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
My name's Bill Little. I live at 551 Campfire Drive, but I own a lot in the subdivision in question. I've been waiting for 4 years to build on that lot because I wanted to see what's going to happen to the subdivision. I was at a homeowners association meeting recently, and we discussed what the mansion would be used for, but I still don't know what it's. What is it? What is it zoned for? I mean, what kind of commercial or what kind of business can move into that?
We'll try to answer your question at the conclusion of the public hearing if we can, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm Frida Little, and I'm his wife, and he forgot to ask. When we were at that homeowners association meeting, we were told that it was going to be just 2.9 acres. Where does the 44 acres come in? And how much does that involve around there? Because that area out there has changed dramatically since we bought that lot. And I understand the downturn in the economy, but that was marketed as to be a much better and a bigger development than what it's turning out to be, which greatly affects the property values there. The mansion is beautiful, and I know that it can be restored, but our concern is what is going to go on that 44 acres, because we don't have any clarification, and that's why we're here today, is that if you sell that, you know, are we going to have, I know we discussed at the meeting with Mr. Parks, you know, that we would have some say-so as to what would go in there, that there would be some restrictions on what would go on that property. And so that's what my concern is that if you take that 44 acres out, you know, are there going to be restrictions on it? And I just need clarification on that.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Victoria Taylor. I live at 2003 Daylily Drive in Franklin, Tennessee. And I'm here tonight because I have a desire to purchase and restore the mansion. And I know that I'm going to have to spend a lot of money on that house to bring it back up to where it needs to be and to sell it. And so my concern is what the 44 acres will be used for, because if the homes around it, if there are homes built around it, like in Marymount Springs, then I can sell the house and make a considerable profit. If they don't, if you use it for something else, then I'll have a hard time selling it for for the money that I'm going to have to put in the property. So I would like that clarification also for the 44 acres and what it's going to be used for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Taylor. Anybody else would like to speak? Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Parks, would you like to comment on any of the questions?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Lamb, members of the commission. I'm Bob Parks, and along with Mel Adams, the developer. The 44 acres is what encompasses the entire residential tract that's being transformed and doing away with the alleys. The mansion is still 2.9 acres. That has not changed. We did discuss 3 or 4 usages that night. And I think Mr. Adelot can probably go with it. You probably have that in there. So, and I told the residents that night, if you have any concerns about any of those potential uses, let me know. I think one was possibly a bed and breakfast, maybe an events facility, but odds are it's probably going to be like Ms. Taylor just got up, and I just talked to her this afternoon. I think it's best suited for residents. But we have 3 or 4 usages in there, so if you have any questions about those or we need to talk about them, we're certainly open to do that. But the 44 acres is just what's being changed. The mansion is still on 2.9.
Okay.
And Mr. Parks, just a point of clarification, on the remaining acreage, you're just changing the house type to get rid of the alley product. It's very similar to what's currently entitled on the property.
Correct. Nothing else changes. The alley product is not as conducive as it was several years ago, so we just did away with it. The rest of the product stays the same. No changes whatsoever.
And no development on the 2.9 acres where the mansion sits?
No. The 2.9 would be preserved for the mansion and whatever usage is most appropriate for that.
Okay. Mr. Gilley?
Mr. Parks, when you do away with the alley-loaded product, the type of housing that you're having, as far as blending in with the rest of the development, that part's not changing. It's just being restructured from an alley-loaded product to a more typical
Correct.
residential.
Correct. There's a product going up out there right now that's a great empty nester product that really fits better than the alley product. Similar price points, and it's just it's a more sellable product right now, too.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Ms. Jones?
Mr. Adelot, so we're looking at this booklet as being what we would approve, basically, and so the things that are listed that the 2.9 acres with the mansion could be used for are the single-family residence, bed and breakfast, an event facility such as a wedding facility, possibly subdividing the single-family 2.9 acres and having 2 homes up on Rucker Lane and still have the mansion back behind, and they would all share the same driveway. That's an option.
Potentially so, yes, ma'am.
Office building and restaurant. And when we define, I mean, is there any definition of event facility in our regulations or anything? I mean, a wedding facility would certainly be appropriate, but an event facility such as a Stampede or something like that, might not be. Since I had one of those in my backyard once, but
Well, for a point of clarification, Stampede was not an event facility.
Right.
Although
But
events occurred there.
Events, such as that type of event, would that qualify as an event to?
No, but
for
I
our
would,
event
I
facility?
would give you an idea of what I would consider an event facility is the Carriage Lane Inn,
Mhm.
where they have an event facility associated with their bed and breakfast. That's probably about as good example as I could come up with of what it would be. Sometimes it's weddings, sometimes it's a bridge club, sometimes it's a neighborhood meeting hosted by me where I talk to the residents in the area. It's not a community center because it's privately owned and it's hopefully for profit some of the time, but most of the time I'm afraid the owner barely breaks even, and she makes it available to me because she is someone who wants to support her community and wants it to be available to her neighbors, and being a good neighbor. This would not be the kind of place where there would be commercial alcohol sales. That's not something, but something where associated with a wedding, they may have wine.
Right,
or
and I'm
refreshments.
perfectly fine with that type of facility as long as our definition of event facility doesn't expand further or give somebody options to things that we
No,
might not.
it's not going to be a nightclub.
allow.
It's not going to be something that's already defined in the ordinance. Sometimes these kind of events may be a political fundraiser for somebody,
Right.
but that's not going to be the kind of thing that would be a reoccurring. You can show up here every Thursday night and expect to dance and drink
Yeah.
and whatever.
Well, Mr. Young thinks the Harlem Shake is an event, so.
Well, like there was a United Way event out there several years ago.
And
That's the type of
be
thing.
that would be a good event. I was going to mention this. The Littles, you all don't have a copy of the application book. Mr. Gilly gave me his, and I don't need it because I've got one in my office. I've got it on my computer. You're welcome to his. He said you can have it. So that will give you an explanation of the program.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure Mr. Parks will probably be glad to meet with you guys after the meeting if you'd like to talk to him. But any other questions or comments pertaining to this proposal? Now we're ready for a motion.
Move for approval. Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to the next item is a zoning application for approximately 21.9 acres along Robert Rose Drive to be rezoned from commercial highway to RM16. North Church LLC is applicant. Mr. Adelon.
Yes, sir. The subject property is located along Robert Rose Drive on the west side of Robert Rose, just to the south of the Medical Center Parkway, and to the east side of the Belks, which is part of the avenues. The property is currently zoned commercial highway. It's been zoned this manner since its annexation several years ago. The property is part of a larger tract from which the Medical Center Parkway dissects, and from which the avenues was carved out in the last several years. The applicant desires that this portion of the property, which does not front on the Medical Center Parkway, be rezoned from commercial highway to RM16. He has an interest in seeing it developed with multifamily uses as a multifamily complex. We discussed different zone approaches. We discussed whether it ought to be a planned development or not. And his feeling and their feeling, the applicants, are that they know they're going to be going through the Gateway Design Review process. They're going to be going through first a pre-design conference, an initial design review with the Planning Commission, and then a final design with the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission is going to be looking very closely at the architecture as well. In all respects, that they can conform to the requirements of the RM16 zoning, and they expect to conform to the requirements of the Gateway Design Overlay District. Incidentally, they do not have any interest in vinyl. They're looking at a masonry product. They know what they want to build. They're not interested in fussing with me about about vinyl or adhering to any kind of vinyl policy that we may have. So they have a pretty good idea what they're wanting to do, but they prefer to go the RM16 approach. As a rezoning, the Planning Commission needs to conduct a public hearing, and then we need to prepare a recommendation for City Council.
Okay. Any comments or questions? I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Seeing there's nobody left hardly, and nobody coming forward, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission?
Chairman, I move for approval.
Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Item G, rezoning request for approximately 6.9 acres along Hazelwood Street to be rezoned from commercial highway, 2.6 acres, and RM12, 4.35 acres, to RM16, Kathy and Wayne Nobles, Perry Construction Company, and Oakland Properties applicants. Mr. Adelot.
Yes, sir. The subject property is located along the north side of Hazelwood Street, and it extends from New Las Casas Highway to Old Las Casas Highway. This property has a really unusual shape, and all of the parcels have been affected by the construction of Hazelwood Street, which we built several years ago in cooperation with the property owners. When I say we, I mean the city of Murfreesboro. And the property owners gave the right-of-way to see the street. The reason, of course, at that time was they wanted to work with the city, yes, but also the major thoroughfare plan called for the extension of the street. And it did affect all the parcels. Now that they are in a situation where they have a property owner, or they have a party that's interested in purchasing a property for the development of multifamily that would be oriented towards the MTSU, the student housing complex, which is essentially a similar one is located to the north of them, that's adjacent to them, and to the south of them, which is adjacent to them. They have asked that all of the property, although it's in several different parcels and ownership, be zoned to RM16, the same as other property in the area. The property, they're hopeful, and right now they cannot say with certainty, but they're hopeful that with moving forward with the zoning, they'll be able to catch the construction season in 2013 to see a opening of the project in 2014. At this point, they're in sort of that critical window where they're trying to make a decision. If they don't get their zone in place, the decision will be made for them, and they'll be into 2015. So it was something that needed to be moved forward with this. So at this point, they're wanting to move forward with the application to RM16, and of course, they're here, represented by Ms. Nobles, and I'll be glad to answer questions as well.
Any questions from Mr. Adelot or the applicant? Does the applicant or a representative for the applicant have anything they'd like to say before I open the public hearing? No? In that case, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Seeing nobody once again come forward, I'll close the public hearing. If there's no questions from the Planning Commission, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The final public hearing tonight is a zoning application for approximately 1.77 acres along Deal Lane to be rezoned from PCD to RM16. Mr. Larry Talbert is the applicant. Mr. Adelot.
Yes, sir. The subject property is located along the east side of Deal Lane. This property is located south of the TSC store that's located on the corner of Deal Lane and John Bragg Highway. The property is colored orange on the map that you see on the television screen. The property to the south is zoned RM16 and is developed with a townhome type development. The property to the north is the TSC. There is an access drive that crosses the property that divides this property from the TSC store. The zoning for this property came about as I'm going to now characterize it as a mistake on the part of the previous owner who was developing the TSC store. He included this property, although it was, as they got into the site plan, they found out that they did not need this amount of acreage, but they'd included it in the rezoning to PCD at the time, thinking it was needed. And then as they turned in their site plan and got in, it was not needed at all. It has remained zoned PCD. The current owner, which is the same owner as, I think it's has the involved with the property to the south, but it's not the owner of that now because those are townhomes. But was associated with that. Now wants to see this property developed as an extension of the townhomes to the south. They have requested this property be zoned to RM16 to allow it. Under the RM16 zoning, the property could be developed with about 28 units. They've provided us a little concept site plan that shows 23 units. I'll be glad to answer your questions about the application.
Any questions?
Seems to be done more of a townhouse structure as opposed to a traditional apartment building, or? Do you know that?
Mr. Gilly, I couldn't say with certainty on that. The forces, the market forces that were driving the townhouse developments have changed a little bit. I think that they would like to be able to preserve that capability. Immediately, it may be more of a rental type of environment. A lot of those units are rental in that townhome development. I'm certainly want to preserve that capability. Of course, in the state of Tennessee, a horizontal property regime can be placed on almost any apartment complex now.
Any other questions? Not, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Mr. Bowman?
Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. I presume we're ready for a motion.
You're next.
Make a motion, we approve.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda tonight. Staff reports and other business, Mr. Adelot.
Yes, sir. Just briefly, just to give you an idea, I think that the business activity is picking up with the Planning Commission. I think the last several agendas we've had, we've seen an increased number of plats and plans. This month, for our day meeting, will be no exception. We've got quite a number of new submittals. Also, I noticed that the Dow Jones is up, and I think that's an indicator that there's a recovery going on somewhere, and I think we're beginning to feel it here. So I wanted to kind of lay a little bit of groundwork for an awakening on the part of Planning Commission and the administration that activity is picking up, and it's being felt in our department.
Right.
We agree, and we're all for it. So, thank you very much. Any other business before the Planning Commission? Not, we stand adjourned.